The housing market is shifting yet again, and with that comes a lot of questions. Things like, where are home prices headed? Should I wait for lower interest rates? Should I buy now or should I wait? I've been selling real estate for over 20 years, and my goal with this video is to provide you with clear, no-nonsense real estate advice so that you can make confident decisions in today's market. But with that, what's the number one question you have about buying or selling in today's market? Drop it in the comments, and if I don't discuss it in today's video, I'll make sure that I come back and have that conversation with you. And if you find value in clear, no-nonsense real estate advice from a real estate professional with over 20 years of experience, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe to the channel. Now, the number one question I'm getting from everyone at the moment, clients, people looking to buy, potential sellers, are where are home prices headed? And here's the thing, it's a completely reasonable question based on everything that's happening at the moment. If you're watching the news and paying attention to the media, it looks like home prices are crashing. While if you're watching channels like mine, I'm still helping you try to be competitive in somewhat of a slower market. Yes, 2025 has probably been the most balanced market that we've had since 2019. So it's been about 5 years since there's been some equilibrium between both buyers and sellers, because for the better part of that 5 years, sellers had complete control. And that's because inventory was low, buyer demand was high, and a lot of that was fueled by lower interest rates. But in 2023, interest rates nearly doubled. And with that, it put pressure on housing affordability, demand started to slow down. And because of that, we saw inventory start to grow. Now, it's taken about 2 years for inventory to grow back above those pre-pandemic levels in 14 states. But with that, I think it's very, very important to note that there's still 36 states where inventory is still lower where it was prior to the pandemic. And so you know the old cliche that real estate is local. That couldn't be more true than right now. So in some markets out there, supply is actually exceeding demand, which means those are the markets where buyers have the most control. There's pricing pressure on sellers, right? Sellers are starting to panic a little bit because housing isn't moving nearly as quickly as they probably thought it would. But on the other side of the coin, those 36 states where inventory is low, I would say that it's more balanced than anything else. Yes, there are some price points where it's still very competitive. If you're below the median home price out there anywhere in the United States, chances are there's multiple offers. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go above the asking price and do crazy things in order to get your offer accepted. It just means that it's not the doom and gloom that you're seeing on TV. So you need to make sure you're working with a professional in your market that understands that market, can guide you in that market, right? Currently, where I'm located in Orange County, there are homes selling the very first weekend they come on the market, and there are homes sitting for a couple of months, all in the same price point. And it's all about understanding why. Why are those homes sitting? Why are some getting offers and others aren't? Because that local knowledge can help you as a buyer write a competitive offer that the seller might possibly entertain. Because what I'm hearing is a lot of people are commenting on my live videos and on my videos saying, hey, Jeb, what's a reasonable price to offer on this home? And they give me some specifics without me actually understanding the market. So instead of just randomly asking a real estate agent that doesn't know your market, make sure you're working with a professional that's local to you that understands what's going on if you're serious about buying in today's market. Now, with that said, we are moving into a slower time of the year. This is typically the time of year when inventory starts to pull back, right? It's that fall winter market across most real estate markets out there, which means as school ends and that fall market starts to begin, which is essentially where we are now after Labor Day, inventory starts to pull back. And with that, buyer demand also typically starts to pull back. So you've got inventory pulling back, you got buyer demand pulling back, which creates somewhat of an equilibrium in the market. Now, home prices have stabilized in a lot of markets out there. We're not seeing big price declines in any real markets out there. Now, there might be some anomalies in markets where inventory skyrocketed, but that's typically concentrated in only a few pockets across the United States. You might have a couple of those in Texas and a couple of those in Florida. Outside of those areas, you're not really seeing big price declines. But here's what I am seeing. Mortgage rates actually pulled back over the last couple of weeks. At the moment I'm filming this video, we're in the low 6% range on conventional loans, and we're actually under 6% on FHA and VA. And with that little tick down in interest rates, I've had 2 properties that have been sitting on the market for over a couple of months that are now getting activity. They're now getting offers. In fact, one of them just went under contract yesterday. So my belief is that I think interest rates are probably going to continue to grind lower throughout the rest of the year. And with that, I think it's going to keep buyer demand pretty stable. We actually have the highest mortgage demand that we've had in the last 3 years, because of that little move in mortgage rates. So as we move into the fall, inventory pulls back, mortgage demand's likely to pick up. That means a lot of markets out there are probably going to see a little bit more activity, which again is going to stabilize home prices. It's going to give sellers a little bit more of an advantage, especially if they're in a competitive price point. So my personal belief is that home prices are probably going to move sideways to slightly up in most markets throughout the remainder of 2025. Now let's take a minute here and talk about interest rates in a little bit more detail. A moment ago, I mentioned that I thought interest rates could continue to grind lower throughout the remainder of 2025. What do I actually mean by that? I think that you could see interest rates in the low sixes, a little bit lower than where we are right now, maybe around 6%, possibly even into the high fives by the end of the year. And the reason I believe that is because we're starting to get economic data that supports lower interest rates, right? The Fed is paying attention to employment, they're paying attention to inflation. And while inflation is kind of a sticking point out there at the moment, it looks like the employment numbers are continuing to get weaker, as we saw in the BLS reports, along with the revisions that they did, in addition to seeing jobless claims finally grind higher. So my belief is if those numbers continue to disappoint like they have over the last 30 days or so, that likely means more pressure on the Fed to adjust the Fed funds rate lower, along with spreads compressing, which in turn would allow mortgage rates to come down. But the question for a lot of people watching is, should I wait for those lower rates? Should I wait for the Fed to cut rates before I actually move forward? And the answer is no, you shouldn't wait for the Fed. And the reason for that is because what the Fed is doing is already baked into the cake. We've talked about it multiple times. At the time we're filming this video, the Fed is projected to cut the Fed funds rate by at least 3 times this year. So if the Fed comes out this week on the 17th and cuts as projected, that's not likely to move mortgage rates because it's already baked into those projections, right? We talked about the Fed being transparent. The Fed is very, very transparent on what they're likely to do. And because of that transparency, the market has already baked that into the cake. Waiting for the perfect interest rate can often backfire. Prices, competition, and interest rates rarely align. See, here's the thing. We've seen interest rates grind lower by about 0.5% over, say, a 30-day period. And there's a real chance that interest rates move sideways for an extended period of time, kind of catching up and consolidating, if you will, versus just continuing to grind lower. While we all want to see interest rates move lower, we don't want to see them just drop and continue to drop and drop and drop, because that often results in huge volatility and huge swings in the market. If you can see interest rates come down, consolidate a little bit, maybe move sideways for an extended period of time, move down again, move sideways, move down, that sort of thing, that's a healthy market. So with that, there's a real cost of waiting. While you're waiting, home prices can continue to move sideways to slightly up. At the same time, competition can come back to the market. In addition to that, I could be completely wrong and interest rates could move back up. So while you're sitting there waiting on affordability to improve, you can end up missing out on the market altogether. In fact, that's what we saw about a year ago this time. As interest rates hit that 6% level, a lot of people were sitting on the sidelines saying, hey, listen, I'm just going to wait for them to continue to move lower and then I'm going to jump in, only to see interest rates move up about a full percent at that time, which put a lot of buyers back on the sidelines still waiting today. And in a lot of markets out there, home prices rose over the last year 2, 3, 4%, which essentially backfired. In fact, that's something I've seen over my career is people waiting. You know, when the market is going hot, people are waiting for prices to come back down. As the market starts to stabilize and prices start to go down or move sideways, people say, hey, I'm going to wait again. I'm going to wait for things to move lower. And then it goes back up and then they miss out on that opportunity as well. So the key here is not trying to pick the top or the bottom in the market, but buying when it's the right time in your life. Making sure you have money in the bank after your closing costs, after your down payment, making sure you're comfortable with that monthly payment. You don't have to like it. I don't like my mortgage payment, but I make it every single month. And you have to like it so much that if interest rates don't change, don't pull back, you're comfortable making that payment for a 5 to 10 year period of time. You need to have a longer term time horizon in this market, not because home prices are going to crash, but there's a real probability that home prices do move sideways, slightly up, keeping pace with the rate of inflation. So you're not likely to see those 5, 10, 15% gains that we've seen over the last couple of years. So the question of should you buy now or should you wait is all relative. It depends on who you are, where you are in your life. I often talk about buying when it's the right time for you versus someone else, right? It might be the right time for you to buy versus your friends. It might not. But either way, you need to be thinking about you personally and not the advice you're getting from other people. Buy because you have job stability. Buy because you have relationship stability. Buy because you have that longer term time horizon. You have money in the bank. You're comfortable with the payment. You're looking at real estate as a long-term play, not this whole get rich quick type of play that a lot of people out there are talking about YouTube, about buying, rehabbing, selling, doing these quick fixes overnight. Yes, that stuff can work, but the real money in real estate is holding it long term. So if you're a potential buyer out there in today's market, I wouldn't be worrying about whether it's a buyer's market, whether it's a seller's market, that sort of thing. Now, one question I'm getting from a lot of people, they keep asking me, hey Jeb, is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, it depends on where you're located, right? Some markets out there at the moment are a little bit more buyer friendly. Some markets out there at the moment are still seller friendly. But my advice is don't worry or to get caught up in the whole idea of a buyer's market or a seller's market. You just got to do what the market is doing. So if you're in a market that has a lot of active inventory, things are sitting for an extended period of time, you probably have more negotiating power there. Whereas if you're in a market where inventory is scarce, you haven't seen anything that you like, or you've been putting in offers and they haven't been getting accepted, well, that's a sure sign that you're probably in a seller's market and you need to adjust accordingly, right? But either way, work with a professional that understands the market, can guide you, help you negotiate, provide you with clarity so that you can make the right decisions for yourself. My personal belief at the moment is that you don't need to rush out there and buy a house, right? Wait for the right opportunity for you. Wait for the right time in your life. But with that said, I want to be very, very clear. I don't think housing is going to get that much more affordable. I do think there's an opportunity for interest rates to come down to improve affordability on that level. But at the same time, I don't see interest rates coming down in a huge way to make affordability that much better. If it did, it would add more buyer demand back to the market and prices would increase further from there. So I see more of a balance going forward with a higher probability that prices move up than they move down. I think the key thing to take away from this video is that prices aren't crashing, interest rates aren't going to move down in a straight line, and the right time to buy for you is when you're prepared. Now, after watching this, what are questions that you still have about the housing market? Make sure you drop them in the comments, hit the like and subscribe if you found any value, and make sure to check out this video if you have additional questions on the current housing market.